Chapter 10. To get to Russell Long's house, we followed a grassy wagon track between the slope and a little creek that ran through a narrow valley. Jamie said the house was on the other side of the mountain. "It's my home place," he said, "and I reckon it belongs to me as much as to him. Don't worry, he won't bother you. In fact, he probably won't speak to you, so while I'm gone, just keep out of his way." "You're leaving me there?" "I'll be with you tonight, and I'll be back in 3 days. I gotta be at Camp 6 tomorrow, ready to work." I didn't complain, but I must have looked distressed, because he said, "Sweetheart, I figure your pretty little cousins have had worse hardships on that wagon train, and likely they'll find no nice house waiting for them when they get where they're going. This ain't what I wanted, but you just gotta bear up. It'll work out." I felt selfish, worrying so much about myself when I'd left my cousins to face their hardships alone. Of course, they weren't alone. They had Uncle Bert and they had each other. From that point on, Jamie made my heart light again, for he sang as we tramped along on the shaded, grassy road, songs that made me want to skip and dance. He'd learned his songs and his dancing somewhere, and I wondered if there were barn socials in Winkler. But when I asked, he said, "That place? The church is against dancing as much as it's against cards and drinking, and after the company, church folks rules the town. Of course, that don't mean the church stops everything. There's places for cards and such, where the company don't own." "But no socials for dancing?" "None I ever heard of." "Then how did you learn?" The light in his face said he was about to speak of sweet memories. "Ma danced with us when we was little and sang to make the music. That's how I learned my songs. She wanted a fiddle, but Pa was against it." "Your brother danced too?" "A man who liked music and dancing couldn't be all bad. Not after he got grown. He was clumsy, always was that way. Ma never made fun of him or said I danced the best, but even a fool could see it." Late in the afternoon, we turned off the grassy track onto one that wound upward through the woods. "We'll be there soon," Jamie said. "We're close." We tramped on a carpet of pine needles through a dark stand of giant trees with mossy rocks and rotting tree limbs, but soon the pines were replaced by a lighter forest of oaks and walnuts, ferns, and a few sunny spots. "This is it," Jamie said. The path had brought us out to a high meadow where the sky reached down to the ground. Beyond the meadow was a cluster of rough lumber sheds surrounded by dirt and puddles. Around the sheds, a flock of chickens clucked and pecked, a horse and a goat nibbled on weeds, and a sow rooted in the ground while her piglets fell over each other in their attempts to latch onto her nipples. The animals were not fenced in, but a whitewashed picket fence surrounded a neat cottage, and barbed wire enclosed a garden where corn grew tall. "This is home," he said. Or was. The cottage was also made of rough lumber, but it had an approach of flat stepping stones, a foundation of mortised rock, a wide porch with a single chair, and an open door. Fragrant, wild honeysuckle bloomed on a lattice at one end of the porch. From what Jamie had said about his brother, I knew not to expect a warm welcome, and I was glad I was prepared, because we did not get it. He came from the house pointing a rifle. Slowly, he lowered the gun, glancing from me to Jamie. "What's this?" Jamie and his brother looked nothing alike. Russell was taller and broader, with gray in his greasy hair and bushy beard, and he peered like he couldn't see well. His trousers were held up on suspenders over a grimy undershirt. "Brought my wife to say hello," Jamie said, squeezing my hand. "Hello," I said. Russell didn't move from his place on the porch, say hello or look at me, but he lowered his rifle. "Thought you'd gone west." "This is better," Jamie said. I knew enough to be quiet and let them talk. Russell grunted. "Where you think you're going now?" "Got a job with Winkler Lumber in a camp." Russell said nothing, but his eyes flicked briefly toward me. "Camp 6, Jamie said. Russell nodded. "No room for her there. I got money to buy a place." Our money, I thought, my gift from Uncle Bert. Russell's brows lifted like he was impressed or surprised. "Got a place picked out, do you?" "Hoped you know of something." "Don't know nothing about town," Russell said. "I don't want town." Her might like it. He hadn't said hello, but at least he'd acknowledged I was there. "She wouldn't," Jamie said. "And I wouldn't. Can I get to Camp 6 from here, or do I need to go up from town?" "I ain't sure where Camp 6 is, and likely you'd lose your way in the dark, even if you knowed where you was going. You best go back to town while there's light and go up in the morning with the supply train." Russell's advice sounded good to me. I whispered to Jamie, "Will we rest before we start back?" He didn't answer. Instead, he said to his brother, "She'll stay here. I'll come back Saturday night and we'll get on our way on Sunday." "Got no place here for a woman," Russell said. "Her name is May Rose." Russell's eyes flicked side to side. "Like I said." "This here is my place too," Jamie said. Russell walked to the side of the porch and spit tobacco juice. "You might have been born here. I worked with you and Pa until you was old enough to chase women. Then you left and I took care of Ma." Jamie whispered, "Pay him no mind." To Russell, he said, "I ain't gonna leave her alone in Winkler. She'll keep out of your way. She's an obedient girl, and she's used to sleeping out, so you don't need to make room for her in the house." I was ashamed he'd said that about sleeping out, for until I'd married Jamie, I'd always slept in a clean bed in a decent house. "Russell, like I said, we'll leave Sunday. You don't have to feed her or even see her. I'll set her up in the corn crib. Don't worry, she won't bother nothing." To me, he said, "Next to the cabin, it's the best place, clean and dry and screened so rats can't get in." His brother said no more, just turned and went into his house. Jamie showed me the outhouse, and we splashed off our faces and hands in the water trough. For the times we'd slept out, we'd acquired tin plates, forks, and drinking cups, and Jamie turned a handle of the spout feeding the trough and filled our cups. "It's spring water, safe as long as it comes from the spout," he said. "Don't drink from the trough." "I'd rather go with you," I said. "Maybe get a room in town?" Jamie frowned. "You're better off here. He just ain't used to people." I pressed my lips together in a pretend smile and begged no more, because I did not want him to think I was too easily daunted, a young and foolish girl who might cry like an abandoned baby. "And on Sunday, when you come back, will we find our house then?" "I'll find it before I come," he said. "I've been all over these mountains, though the logging's made everything look different. There's old folks here just waiting for a chance to go someplace better. They'll sell out for good money." "You'll buy a place?" "It'll be fine. You'll see." Half the corn crib was latticed and screened for corn, and the other half was a storage place with buckets, crocks, pitchers, and lumber stacked neatly on the floor and shelves. Onions hung from a nail, braided together by their dried tops. Jamie was right. The room was clean and tight. Here and there, tin had been nailed over cracks, and the one window was tightly screened. The door was screened too, so there would be cooler air if the nights were hot. Jamie spread our blanket on the floor and laid our bread, eggs, and the beef stick atop one of the barrels. "The camps feed the men real good, so this is for you. Make it last till Saturday." He reached out and I walked into his arms, and he wrapped them around me and bowed his head to my shoulder. "You're the world to me," he said. He had a way of making everything right. He gave me a quick squeeze and stepped back. "I gotta go. Give me them gold pieces." Stupidly, I said, "You want them now?" "They'll buy us a place, May Rose." If he worked until Saturday afternoon, when would he have time to locate a house for us? Perhaps this very night in Winkler. Surely not everyone there was wicked. He'd spoken of a church. I lifted my skirt and fumbled at the ties of the money belt. "How many pieces do you need?" "How many? I don't know what a place might cost, so give me all. Likely we'll need things from the store, too. You did a good job of keeping them safe. Now we'll put them to use." I held out the belt, glad to be rid of its bulk and weight. "Will you wear it?" "The old pouch'll do." The pouch I'd hidden in the valise held 7 copper pennies and a silver 10-cent piece. He handed those to me in exchange for the gold pieces from the money belt. Then he tied the strings of the pouch to his belt and pushed the pouch down into a pocket. "One more kiss," he said. "Make it a good one, 'cause it's gotta last me 3 days." After that long kiss, I stood in the corn crib doorway and watched him leave. A few steps away, he turned around and walked backwards, waving. Then he ran to the edge of the woods, where he stopped and turned for a last look. I blew him a kiss, and he tipped his cap, turned around and disappeared behind the trees. In my mind, I pictured him the rest of that day, retracing our steps back to Winkler, likely sleeping out somewhere, and in the morning, getting on the supply train to his camp, then working all day and somehow finding time to provide a house for us before his return. All while, I idled here in my choice of shade or sun. As I folded the money belt to put in my valise, my fingers felt something hard. It was a coin, caught between the edges of the seam, not a golden eagle, but nearly as good, a silver dollar. My first thought was how pleased Jamie would be to learn of it. But the second was a decision to keep the coin secret against some future need, perhaps a surprise for my hard-working husband.